Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for joining our live stream today. We will be starting the program with the recitation of Quran. Let's welcome Salat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل أوحي إلي أنه استمع نفر من الجن فقالوا إنا سمعنا قرآنا عجبا يهدي إلى الرشد فآمنا به ولن نشرك بربنا أحدا وأنه تعالى جد ربنا ما اتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا وأنه كان يقول سفيهنا على الله شططا وأنا ظننا أن لن تقول الإنس والجن على الله كذبا وأنه كان رجال من الإنس يعوذون برجال من الجن فزادوهم رهقا وأنهم ظنوا كما ظننتم أن لن يبعث الله أحدا وأنا لمسنا السماء فوجدناها ملئت حرسا شديدا وشهبا وأنا كنا نقعد منها مقاعد للسمع فمن يستمع الآن يجد له شهابا رصدا وأنا لا ندري أشر أريد بمن في الأرض أم أراد بهم ربهم رشدا وأنا منا الصالحون ومنا دون ذلك كنا طرائق قددا وأنا ظننا أن لن نعجز الله في الأرض ولن نعجزه هربا وأنا لما سمعنا الهدى آمنا به فمن يؤمن بربه فلا يخاف بخسا ولا رهقا وأنا منا المسلمون ومنا القاسطون فمن أسلم فأولئك تحروا رشدا وأما القاسطون فكانوا لجهنم حطبا وأن لو استقاموا على الطريقة لأسقيناهم ماء غدقا لنفتنهم فيه ومن يعرض عن ذكر ربه يسلكه عذابا صعدا وأن المساجد لله فلا تدعوا مع الله أحدا وأنه لما قام عبد الله يدعوه كادوا يكونون عليه لبدا قل إنما أدعو ربي ولا أشرك به أحدا قل إني لا أملك لكم ضرا ولا رشدا قل إني لن يجيرني من الله أحد ولن أجد من دونه ملتحدا إلا بلاغا من الله ورسالاته ومن يعص الله ورسوله فإن له نار جهنم خالدين فيها أبدا حتى إذا رأوا ما يوعدون فسيعلمون من أضعف ناصرا وأقل عددا قل إن أدري أقريب ما توعدون أم يجعل له ربي أمدا عالم الغيب فلا يظهر على غيبه أحدا إلا من ارتضى من رسول فإنه يسلك من بين يديه ومن خلفه رصدا ليعلم أن قد أبلغوا رسالات ربهم وأحاط بما لديهم وأحصى كل شيء عددا بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها المزمل قم الليل إلا قليلا نصفه أو انقص منه قليلا أو زد عليه ورتل القرآن ترتيلا إنا سنلقي عليك قولا ثقيلا إن ناشئة الليل هي أشد وطئا وأقوم قيلا إن لك في النهار سبحا طويلا واذكر اسم ربك وتبتل إليه تبتيلا رب المشرق والمغرب لا إله إلا هو فاتخذه وكيلا واصبر على ما يقولون واهجرهم هجرا جميلا وذرني والمكذبين أولي النعمة ومهلهم قليلا إن لدينا أنكالا وجحيما وطعاما ذا غصة وعذابا أليما يوم ترجف الأرض والجبال وكانت الجبال كثيبا مهيلا إنا أرسلنا إليكم رسولا شاهدا عليكم كما أرسلنا إلى فرعون رسولا فعصى فرعون الرسول فأخذناه أخذا وبيلا فكيف تتقون إن كفرتم يوما يجعل الولدان شيبا السماء منفطر به كان وعده مفعولا إن هذه تذكرة فمن شاء اتخذ إلى ربه سبيلا صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Thank you very much for that beautiful recitation. Before we move on to the main part of the program, I'd like to take this opportunity to share a few words about the Salam Center. Many of you will know about this exciting, unique and forward-thinking community center project that we're working on that's open to everybody. And some of the pictures of what it will really look like in real life are on the screen in front of you. Just a little bit about the journey. It's taken a long time. We started this all discussing this in sort of early 2000s. By 2009, 2010, we raised the initial amount that was required and got planning permission. In the last 10 years, we've had significant international engagement, detailed planning, raising significant funds, and started the building of the Salam Center with the ground floor, groundbreak, and construction of the basement already complete. And we've raised already £10 million. Just a little bit about the vision. What we're looking at creating here is an open, diverse and creative community centre as a model for others. We want it to be attractive, accessible and genuinely inclusive for everyone. We want it to strengthen families, bring communities together holistically, religiously, spiritually, physically and socially. We want to be a beacon of creativity and innovation. And we want to have pride in our heritage, but also be confident in who we are and how we engage with others. And all of this, we want it to be sustainable and replicable. Those are the core elements and tenets of the way that we think about the Salam Center. And therefore, the Salam Center is going to be a holistic, open and inviting center. And they will have a range of different things here, all to enable this and make this vision a reality. This includes, of course, a prayer hall, which will be able to host 250 people quite easily, and a ghusl and coffin area, as well as a multi-purpose second hall. But also sports facilities like a sports hall, which can hold five-side football, separate gyms for men and women, a beauty salon, library, restaurant, media room, youth centre, as well as children's play areas and gardens of discovery, a garden of contemplation and outdoor areas. The idea is that this is a centre that is really holistic in the way it thinks about engaging with the wider society. And it's really got really widespread support. You've got the top politicians in the area, whether it's the Mayor of London talking about him being excited about it being a beacon for the rest of the world, whether it's the local MP who talks about the vision being great and a fantastic asset for the area, whether it is top religious scholars like Ayatollah Sistani saying he congratulated us on this project, and Ayatollah Fadl Milani who talked about the amazing projects that we're trying to do, and the immense effort and the brilliant dream that we're trying to engage with, as well as local leaders in this area who are deeply impressed with the transformational work we're trying to do. But when it comes to what we need right now, the project is a large project. We've raised 10 million, there's 15 million pounds left. And of that remaining element, we have 9 million pounds covered from a bank loan, and we're really looking for 3 million pounds urgently now. We're hoping to raise 500,000 from within the community and our supporters, and 2.5 million from patrons locally, nationally and internationally. And as Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, nothing shall ensure the welfare of your religion except generosity and good disposition. And we urge everybody who can to support this project. And you can see on this final slide, the salamcenter.com/donation is where you can donate. So please do donate. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope that you can support and make this vision a reality. I'd like to take this opportunity to share with you a new initiative. If you have survived COVID, you have the opportunity to save others, because the antibodies in your blood plasma can help those who are suffering from COVID. Our NHS is collecting blood plasma of COVID survivors in a clinical trial to save thousands of lives. So if you've ever tested positive for COVID or suspect you've had COVID, you can sign up and help save lives. Go to turntolove.org/plasma. Thank you very much.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Before we begin, I'd just like to go over the schedule for tomorrow. The program will start inshallah at 12:30 with the Amal, 1:30 with Salah, 2 p.m. with Maqtal, and then we'll have Matam. Before we begin again, as always, we'll just go over some ground rules. When exiting, please exit one row at a time. Use the hand sanitizers and avoid gathering while in the center. The barak will be at the back. For the Q&A, for any questions, please go to sheikhrf.com/live. Contactless donations can be given at the back of the hall or alternatively online at almahdi.edu/donate. Just another reminder, as we all know, Beirut has suffered a big tragedy. 300,000 have been said to be homeless. 80,000 of those are children. Who is Hussein? As we all know, are fundraising. The ways to donate are at the back when you leave. Please keep them in your du'as. Tonight's program is sponsored on behalf of the marhumin displayed on the TV screens. Please can we recite the Surah Fatiha for these and all other marhumin. Fatiha. Please can we welcome Sheikh with the salawat.
رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وأصحابه المنتجبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى قيام يوم الدين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So Islam has two facets to it. One is the bodily aspect of Islam. Like any other system thought through properly by human minds in their relevant context. And the other one is the spirited side of Islam, where the constant emphasis is that through the body, the mind may be freed, by regulating the body to free the mind. But Islam has an understanding of the human community, as we stated yesterday. It does not see individual human existent beings. Islam considers the human society as one in essence. What is good for all is good for one and each every one of their constituent members. But it is not true the other way around, that what is good for some is good for all. And Islam's outlook has been this, and in fact this is a human outlook, that if the majority are in a comfortable place, then everybody's comfort is assured. And if the majority of the community is a good community, then the individuals have far greater chance of being good, as opposed to a few individual good people existing within a community that is not so good. So Islamic vision is that destiny of humankind is intertwined. Each and every one feeds off everyone. And we stated yesterday that our evolutionary process, we all share. Every learning is integrated. Spirituality needs to be integrated. We need to flow back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as one soul. This God-centric vision of Islam does not allow for the exception of individuals. And that is why we quoted that verse yesterday, that He has sent Islam, or He has sent a deen that will prevail over all deen. That does not mean to rid the human community of its plurality, but what it means is to accommodate the plurality into the singularity of that vision of God, of becoming God-centric. That you can be whatever you are, provided that the essence is accurate and you are flowing towards that essence. So regulation of the body takes a prime concern within Islam. And that's why we have the Sharia ahkam and the Sharia laws. But they are not an end within themselves. Regulating the body in the context of the soul awakening within the body. So the body is a prelude towards awakening the soul to its light and its destiny. So Sharia obviously talks about regulation of the body, but it is not an end in itself. Indeed, we have explained in previous lectures that Salah prevents us from that which is unchaste and that which is reprehensible, but the form of ruku and the form of sajda does not. What happens to the individual through the form of the ruku prevents them from that which is indecent, not the form of the ruku itself. So the body is regulated in order to awaken the mind and to cause the soul to tend towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first priority of Islam was, as far as the bodies were concerned, was to see to their fundamental and primary needs. People need to eat to live. They need shelter over their heads. The first thing Islam did was, it saw to their menial needs. It is no good going and giving somebody the Quran who is hungry. Whilst they are hungry, they cannot think beyond food. You have to create a conducive atmosphere for the body before the mind can start thinking into the lofty ideas of the hereafter, before the soul can yield to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Think about it very, very carefully. When poverty prevails, social injustice is a norm, how will you create godly souls? Because the soul is immersed within the animality of the body. The body is hungry. The soul will become a ferocious soul. Lying, cheating, stealing because of food becomes the norm of the body, and therefore the soul becomes conditioned in that particular condition. It is not the fault of the soul. Imam Ali Salamullah alayhi once said, if faqr, poverty, was a human being, I would chastise it to the extent that I would put it to death. For poverty is the biggest enemy of humanity. When we used to go to Iraq back in the days during Saddam's time, we used to see little children at tender ages begging between the two haram. In the depths of winter, they would not have any footwear, and they would walk bare feet. They would swear, they would shout, they would utter all forms of indecency at you when you would not give them handouts. They had lost all sense of self-respect. They would not go to the schools. What was that due to? That wasn't due to the fact that there were not good souls. That was due to the fact that the bodily needs had not been met with, and they were overly preoccupied within the body. This is the accurate understanding of the Prophet when he came to his community. He did not see monstrous people. He saw noble souls entrapped within animal bodies that were after their animalistic needs. So the first thing he did was he spoke of social justice. He spoke of the ills of poverty. If you keep a community poor, obviously you will find all immoralities emerging. It is not that the nobility of the human being has been diminished. It is that they have been caught up within the needs of the body and have not been allowed to emerge. The first thing that the missionaries went and did when they went to other lands was preach to them. It doesn't work. Those people are poor. They need to be fed. They need shelter upon their heads. They need education. So when these needs are supplied, that is when we can be hopeful of the production of a proper human being. Now this notion of Islamic piety that we have, that we should abstain from the world and the worldly, this is totally inaccurate. The notion of piety within Islam is that you can become somebody who is involved with the world so long as the inner being is detached from it. That is the notion of piety within Islam. Not that the world has to be detached from. Not that the world has to be abstained from. World you can acquire so long as the inner being is detached from it. So first thing Islam does is it caters for the needs of the body. And that's why we have such emphasis upon zakat. That give zakat regularly. Feed the human family. What happens here is that as the human family is fed, the collective human body creates a conducive environment for the minds to coexist in. You see, if people are poor and hungry, then they will not have proper thoughts in their minds. Their minds will be dimmed down. And the energy that we create and the thoughts that we create plague the whole of the world. Now, it's not the fault of those people who are poor, it's the fault of the other part of the family who are well endowed, who are fortunate enough to have their own and more than their own share. The way we are understanding this world is very, very inaccurate. When we say this is my share and I'm giving it away, it's a very false notion. If this is your share, what will you do with it? I will sustain my body, and then what? You're a godly person. What will you do after that? Then in that case, I will then educate myself. And then what? And then I will pray. And then what? I'll become godly. Well, you can't do that. It will not happen because you are the other person as well. That other person who is not so fortunate as you are, who is suffering through poverty, he is adding to the sum total of your soul because you are one soul. Allah says, I have created you from a single soul. If you are in a state of enlightenment and that soul is dimmed, then that soul will dim you as well. I remember once I made a very arrogant statement in front of somebody. They said to me, and this was actually the beginning of my own journey, that one statement of his changed the way I thought. He said, look at the state of the Muslims. I said, no, not the state of the Muslims, look at the state of that group of Muslims. He said, what do you mean? I said, we are Shias, we are good, we are refined people. He said, wait a minute. The onlooker does not distinguish between a Shia and a non-Shia, a Sunni and a non-Shia, a Sunni, a Barelwi and a Deobandi. They see you guys as Muslims. They see you as one family. So if a part of your family is right down there, immersed in corruption, and they're giving a bad example, it will then prevail upon the onlooker's mind that all Muslims are the same. It drags the whole ummah down with it. So I thought, how accurate is this? There is no notion of the Shia, Sunni, Barelwi. It's all false in our heads. It's one humanity, one ummah. Then I began to think, and I think, wait a minute. From God's perspective, there is no Muslim or Christian or Jew or a believer or a disbeliever. They are all humans. God says, I've created you from one soul. And as I have created, I will cause everything to return. So if one segment of humanity is right there at the bottom. The rest of the humanity is also failing. I often used to wonder, why were these great prophets not confining themselves to the caves in the worship of God? No one was more eligible than the blessed prophets to go into seclusion, solitude, isolation, and to worship God. But they were social reformers. They tirelessly worked within the human community. They did not care about believer and non-believer. They preached to one and all. Why? Because they had that insight that humanity is one family. Until and unless everybody evolves and comes to that God-centric vision and arrives at the light of their soul, everybody else will fail. It is like the Blessed Prophet said, that when you're on board a ship, if somebody makes a hole in the seat where they are sitting, you will all drown together. The whole humanity will drown until and unless the whole of humanity emerges to a ripened state of maturity and enlightenment. And that is why we have this very wonderful eschatological literature that when the Mahdi comes, the earth will give its treasures plentifully, and the heavens shall shower them unhesitatingly, and the whole of humanity shall live in bliss. The whole of humanity, not the Muslim. So the human being's bodily needs have to be satisfied first. You can't keep a child hungry and then expect the child to do their homework and to learn anything. The child will not. The body overpowers. So the first thing this blessed prophet did was, he talked about social justice and removal of poverty, and he institutionalized zakat. Now the phenomenal thing that happened here was that the Quran did not talk about the share of zakat that was to be given. 2.5% or this much crop or that much livestock. The Quran just says Atuz zakat. Now how can Quran put figures on it, how much percentage of zakat you have to give? It can't, can it? And then when zakat wasn't enough, then Quran brought in khums. And when khums wasn't enough, then the fay came in, the land and the gifts given to the Prophet without warfare. Allah says, this is for Allah, His Prophet, and the close ones, and the yatim and the miskin and ibn sabil, so that the money may not remain amongst those who are wealthy. It may be spread amongst one and all. So we are seeing that the Quran has been institutionalizing different forms of giving. Why? In accordance with the needs of the people as the society began to evolve. In essence, the rule of giving is in accordance with the need of the people. There cannot be any percentage that is fixed. The taxation that is being practiced in the modern societies is nothing less than what the Prophet institutionalized in the name of zakat and khums. The shares, the percentages were always supposed to fluctuate in order to accommodate the needs. As the needs become greater, the percentages become different. There is nothing more or less than this within the law of the zakat. Now I will say this, that the percentages that the Prophet fixed in his time were relevant to his time. And I will say furthermore, that the income tax and the state tax and whatever other taxes that we give here are no less tax and khums as they were in the time of the Prophet. There is no difference. In essence, it's the same thing. This part of Islam is no different than human society governing itself. When Islam formulated these rules, it formulated within its own context, befitting its own context. There was nothing special about this. So people say this law of zakat is a special law, or law of khums is a special law. I'll say, how is it special? When the Prophet came, khums already existed in a particular way. He came and modified it. When the Prophet came, nikah and talaq already existed. He just endorsed them. When the Prophet came, social contracts existed, buying and selling. He just modified it to make them less abusive. The Prophet did not novelly introduce them. That part of Islam has got nothing to do with religion in essence. This is how human beings conduct themselves. The laws of zakat and khums and whatever we have, talaq and nikah and all of these are contingent to best practice in every era in accordance with how the people see it fit. That's all there is to it. How best to minimize exploitation. How best to increase productivity within the human society. How best to see to their bodily needs. This is a human endeavor. It's as Islam can get. So I'll make that point again that I have often made in my lectures, that when people talk about an Islamic economic system, an Islamic social system, I will say there is no such thing as Islamic economic system. There is no such thing as Islamic social system. There isn't. These are human endeavors. The only thing Islamic about it is become godly through it, which I will explain the spirited aspect of it. Let it not be exploitative. Let it be godly. That's the only Islamic thing about it. There is nothing else Islamic about it in its entirety. So today now, when we say khums is this much, that doesn't make sense at all to anybody. It doesn't make sense. How can you say khums is this much and these shares and that shares? I agree that back in the day, the context required that this percentage goes to this place and this percentage goes to this place. I agree with that. But beyond that context, how does that law make sense to anybody? Do not get offended. Listen with hearts and minds. I'm going to give an example. So, within the Shia community, there is no zakat because we don't have animals, camels and whatever else, right? Because we've interpreted the law on camel and crops. But where does it say in the Quran, give zakat on animal and on the crop? Where does it say so? Did the Prophet not say that the source of guidance, the principal source of guidance is the Quran? Did the Prophet not state this? And my sunnah is subordinate to the Quran. Did he not say this? So if the principal source of guidance is the Quran just says, give zakat. It is unconcerned about animals and crops. Because the fundamental is, cater for the need of the community. Because the community, until and unless its needs are met with, you will not create a godly situation and an environment. That's all the Quran is concerned with. So now, if the Quran says give zakat, it means give zakat on whatever you hold as your own wealth. If that wealth is in forms of camels and goats and sheep, then in that. If your wealth is in terms of your money, then in terms of the money. So our community gives khums instead. Giving khums then, it's spread over 6 entities within the Quran. Lillah, wali rasulihi, wali dhabil qurba, wal yatama, wal masakin, wa ibn sabil. Now I ask, read what the Imams have said about khums. He said, if any one of those shares are not given, then send it to me, I will give it away or I will use my discretion. But there is no distinction of Sayyid and non-Sayyid within the Quran. In the verses, there is no distinction. Now, I agree that there was Sayyid and non-Sayyid distinction, but that was because of the context of the time. Because in that context, the zakat was going to the non-Sayyid because of the way they understood zakat. So therefore, the khums was going to the Sayyid. What was understood of zakat in the later time was that when you purify something, what do you take out of it? Something that's wasteful and dirty, right? Zakki nafsak, purify yourself. When you purify yourself, what do you take out of yourself? You take out filth, right? Now, the Prophet and his family were noble people. Anything associated with filth would not be befitting for them to take. That was the connotation that was there existent with zakat as filth. But if you look at the rules, they will say, but a Sayyid can take a Sayyid zakat, so Sayyid can take a Sayyid's filth, but cannot take a non-Sayyid's filth. Now, if you come into the 21st century and you say, my Islam is telling me that I am a class of person, I can't take your filth, but you can take the filth and eat it. Do you think anybody will be appealed to that level of Islam? Does that make sense to anybody? Allah has no distinction of Sayyid, non-Sayyid, right? إِنَّمَا أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. The people in Arabia had these class systems. The Prophet said, all of you are equal beings in front of God. Abu Sufyan, he was enraged. Bilal was standing there. Now this Muhammad is saying, even your slaves are equal to God in his sight, as well as the free person. How outrageous is this and nonsensical? Abu Sufyan was saying that this Muhammad is saying even a slave has the same status as a free man in the sight of God. So they were appalled. And then somebody else said, he says the women have the same status in the eyes of God as the man, and they were appalled. And Hind, the wife of Abu Sufyan, started smiling. She said, yeah, he's making sense here. The Prophet came and did away with all forms of distinctions. How did we get this distinction within the folds of the Islam of the Blessed Prophet, who came to rid us of forms and distinctions? The Achut, the untouchables of India, were drawn to Islam due to the lack of distinction between one person and another within Islam. Whereas in the Indian caste system, which needs to go now, there is a privileged people, there are privileged people, and there are those that are not privileged. This is an age-old system that has plagued the human mind. It might have worked at some point. It does not work within the 21st century. We are talking about equal dignity of humanity. You are all from Adam, and Adam was from dust. That is what the Blessed Prophet has taught us. So how does it make sense to anybody that you give 2 shares of khums? 1 share goes to 200 million people, and 1 share goes to 15 million people. How can anybody make sense of that? Obviously, I'm not trying to offend anybody. Please forgive me, it's not meant to offend anybody. I'm just trying to say how we have understood things in a very formalistic fashion, whereas they're to be understood in essence. So the zakat and khums law was never contingent on figures and numbers. They were only based on needs. That's about it. And today, as the needs grow, the law of taxation is supposed to expand. But the whole point is that the human needs, animal needs have to be seen too, before the human mind can be freed from the pursuit of food, shelter, so on and so forth. And they can indulge into the finer pursuits of life. Now, just to emphasize this point, the way we are misreading texts, we are reading them very literally, and we are saying they are eternal, whereas this aspect of Islam, which is worldly, which is known as transactional aspect, it is in the hands of humanity. Humanity devises systems as they evolve. Now, think about interest. The Muslim will say interest is haram. Ask them, what is the definition of interest? You'll get a classical answer. Interest means you give money to somebody and you take more money without you putting any work into it. Okay, that makes sense. So now, how can I get more money from that person legally through the legal loopholes? So the answer is, if you give £100 to somebody and you want them to give you back £200, then that's not allowed. But if you give them £100 and you give them a handkerchief, then you can take back £200 because you've given them something extra. But that handkerchief is worth 10 pence. I know, but the legal loophole is there and you can exploit it. This is the formalistic understanding that we have of Islam and zakat and khums and interest. Ask another question. Why do you think interest is haram due to the effects of interest? Then the answer comes, well, according to the Quran, when people were giving interest, when people were loaning money, they were taking 5-10 times more back. It was exploitative. It was exploiting the people's poverty. So we will say, therefore, interest was haram due to its exploitative aspect. So yes, that's the essence. So what if exploitation can be taken out of interest? Then what? If exploitation is not there and the form remains the same, would that be problematic? You've already told me that I can give a handkerchief and take 200 back. What if we take off exploitation altogether? Think about it carefully. If I give somebody money, instead of giving them money, I can keep it in the bank. The bank will work with that money and give me a handsome return. Why can't I give money to a person and say, look, I could have utilized this money and I would have gotten this return from it anyway. You give me that return. I'm not exploiting you. Return is in accordance with what you can give back to me anyway. How is that then haram? This is what happens. Islam came, as far as the formal aspect is concerned, it looked at its own context. And it devised laws. And those laws were most befitting for its own context. It also gave the essence of that law. What is the essence of that law? Zakat was for catering for the growing needs of the community. Let there be money and let that money be shared. So the whole community becomes rich. If everybody becomes rich, you individually will become rich and the society will become a good society. There will be no more robbery, no more theft, no more lying, no more cheating. You will have a sound, human, working community. There will be less crime. The bodily needs will be seen too. Let there be no exploitation. This form of interest is exploitative, cut it off. But today we are seeing that interest can be socially friendly and productive. What Islam did in addition to giving these forms was that it gave it that spiritual side. This is what Islam does. This is what religion does in essence. It converts the mundane human life into a spiritual life. Think about it carefully. It says to the buyer and seller, to the seller it says, don't lie, be mindful of God. When you take the price, take a little bit less, it's mustahab. Give a little bit more, it's mustahab. It makes that mundane act into a spiritual act. And says, through this transaction, rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah will give you more. It's a mundane act, a human act. God induces spirituality inside it. Similarly, it tells the buyer, don't haggle too much. Don't haggle. If the seller is telling you this much, haggle to an extent, but then give what he's asking. Even though you know you are being overcharged a little, just give it for the sake of Allah, for the sake of your dignity, for the sake of the dignity of that person, and Allah will give you plentiful in return. That spirited aspect was what was introduced by Islam. It's amazing the way our minds are. That if somebody is stretching out a hand for handouts, we will give it to them. But a poor man is selling something, we will haggle with him. Think about it carefully. That man, he's making pennies. We are supposed to give him in excess of whatever he is asking. But our minds work very differently. Religion comes and modifies that. So zakat, the first and the fundamental objective of zakat was to see to the human needs of the human community so that their minds can be freed from mundane preoccupations. The second thing about zakat was the spiritual aspect. Make that act for God. The deeper aspect of zakat was to awaken the soul. So once the mind is directed to God, that okay, I am giving to my human family. I'm doing it for the sake of God. This care, because that is me in that form. Those are my children. That is my mother. That is my father. It is not they, it is me in that form. The first thing was to then awaken the mind. And after awakening the mind was the spiritual aspect of zakat. The spiritual aspect was what? Detach from your wealth. The external giving is a form of detaching the heart internally from that position. Imam Ali somewhere says in Nahjul Balagha, he says, do not waste your zakat by not intending God through it. When you give zakat, it will have its physical properties. It will feed the poor. It will educate them. But it will not do much for you until and unless you intend God through it. Once you intend God through it, then that act of giving will do something for you as well. Islam has been about this, about awakening the mind. And at the third level, the religious literature tells us that when you give in the way of God, This giving is a mere expression of an inner state of detachment from whatever you're giving outwardly. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى. Indeed, has reached salvation the one who is in a state of purifying or engaged in a state of purity. How can giving wealth bring about salvation? If I have trillions, even if I give 100 million, how is that going to bring my salvation? It is like me throwing a penny on the street. That giving does not bring salvation. That detachment, inner detachment with ownership brings salvation, because it is freeing the heart of its notion of arbitrary power and control. You see, when people ask me that the people who are rich and wealthy, Allah is not testing them, I say, no, they are being tested more than anybody. Honestly, a poor person knows they are beholden to the mercy of their Lord. They know they have nobody but Allah. But a rich man feels this deluded sense of control and ownership. Theirs is the biggest damnation. If anything, the poor man should feel sorry for the rich man and pray for the rich man. And the poor man will say, as you feed me, I pray for your salvation. You are feeding my body, I'm praying for your soul. Because we get deluded, we think we have control. So zakat means to be in a state of purity, removal of other than God from the self. Now this removal, we have narrowed it down to the removal of the love of this world. But actually the love of the world is not what we think it is. We think the love of the world is love of possession and wealth. And at most we think love of the world is the love of our children. No. The love of the world is the love of oneself. There is no more in the final analysis. The love of the self is the love of the world. Even when we give in the way of God, we say, I feel good about it, I'm doing charity. That defeats the whole purpose at the very fine level. I am praying because I want to go and meet with God. This is the level at which the detachment needs to come, the purity. Now if we look at the verses of the Quran, they're very telling. It says on the day of Qiyamah, Allah will not look at them. He will not speak with them and He will not purify them. Purify them of what? Purify them of their selves. The hadith says anybody with an iota of arrogance will not enter within paradise. The I am part needs to be purified. That needs to go. Another verse says, before they enter paradise, all forms of malice will be extracted from their hearts. Their hearts will be purified before they enter into paradise. Malice only results through this notion of personal identity, I am. I love, I hate, I dislike, I'm resentful. That malice inside there is indicative of the I. Until and unless that I is not purified, the zakat is not done. Be like Hussein. Everything is taken. He says, Allah, it was yours. When was it mine? Whatever is me is pretentious. Man kana mahasinuhu masawiya. He says in his dua, he whose goodness is evil in its entirety. Zakat therefore means, in the final analysis, to purify the soul of the I. To give it away to God, to say, Allah, it is but you. Now at this point, zakat is emphasized in the Quran. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. Indeed, has attained salvation the one who purifies it, the nafs. Because the nafs, after awakening within the body, has become bombarded with this arbitrary notion of I am within the body. Salvation is for the one who purifies this soul. Now tell me, Isn't this the biggest and the most arrogant statement? I am proud to be a Muslim. In the name of God, demon cries out, I'm proud to be a Muslim. Isn't it? And look at the way God tests the greatest of His servants. He says, I am proud to be your worshipper. God said, bow down to Him. I shall not. And there it is. That's the end of story. I am proud to be the lover of Hussein. Who are you to be proud of the lover of Hussein? Who are you? And you love your Hussein so much that you curse the other lover of Hussein? That's how much you love your Hussein? I often say to myself, Sir Arif, aren't you such a liar? You say you die for this Hussein and you live for this Hussein, and then you curse at the Maulanas. I don't curse at the Maulanas. And then you curse at the Maulanas. I'm just giving an example to just emphasize this thing. And then you curse at the Maulanas, but they bear the light of Hussein in their hearts. How can you curse somebody who has the light of your beloved in his heart? Go and kiss their hands, for they are the devotees of the love of your heart. All of this arrogance in any shape or form is the sign of the inner being, the inner ego. Zakat means to purify it. Now, you will see the emphasis in the Quran around the heart, the qalb. If you think why I'm looking that way, because the clock is there, yeah? This overemphasis on the qalb. And in this way, Quran is trying to awaken us. The heart is described as the most intimate part of the human existence. Khatam Allah ala qulubihim. Allah stamps their hearts. No matter whether you warn them or you don't, they shall not return. Fi qulubihim maradun. In their heart is a sickness. Qalbun salim, the sound heart. And then you have yatma'innal qulub. The hearts find rest. Thumma qasat qulubukum. Then your hearts became hardened. Kal hijarati aw ashaddu qaswa, like rocks or even harder still. This emphasis on the heart is there for a reason. If we can just take a few moments to explain this. The heart in the context of a human being and the human soul is like a mirror for the soul and a window for the soul. Whereas the brain is the seat of consciousness for the soul. The soul awakens through the mind, to the brain, but it feels through the heart. If you were to have a heart transplant, you would not become a different person. You will still feel the same way through a new heart. The heart is a receptor, but it is beholden to the soul as to how the soul feels through it. But if you were to transplant a person's brain into somebody else, the whole person will go with the brain. Right? Because the consciousness is connected with the brain. The brain is the intellectual identity of the soul. The heart is the emotional identity of the soul. That heart, when it becomes infected, no matter what you show to that heart, it will appear as it wants it to appear. It cannot see the truth. You see two people, they are both watching a scene of orphans dying. One will be moved with the softness of their heart into tears. And the other one will say, yeah, I've already given to them. They've become desensitized. But both of them are getting the same information. Both of them are responding differently. This is the state of the inner soul. When the soul is accustomed to something, it acquires its identity. When the soul is being sworn at day and night, it becomes accustomed to it. When the soul is bombarded with unbefitting things, the soul acquires that identity. But that identity is arbitrary. Even when the Quran says that their hearts are sealed, it still leaves a window open for these people. That there can also be a return for them. If you compare all the verses of the Quran. What we are told here is, what the Quran tells us, it says, engage in the remembrance of Allah, the dhikr of Allah. Why? Because it awakens the heart to God. I'll give an example of this. You know, when we get accustomed to eating spicy food, when we eat foods that are not spicy, we don't feel a thing. The biggest torture is when we go to Iran for 2 weeks and we are faced with chilo kebabs day and night and there's no taste in them. Who is the one who likes spicy food, the tongue or the soul? It's the soul, right? The tongue is a mere means for us to receive that spice. But it's amazing. If you were to train the tongue to take in bland foods, it will go off and forget the spice, and the soul will then be introduced into a different type of a taste. So the physical body, as it can ruin the soul, it can also enliven the soul. So when we see things that are unbefitting, the soul begins to acquire that identity. And that is known as the heart. And physically we feel love from here, we feel hatred from here. There is something that happens here in this part of the body, doesn't it? So we associate it with heart. But if that heart can be retrained, then the soul begins to relearn. In the final analysis, this body that is so animalistic, if it can be trained properly, it can become a mechanism to God. The speediest burak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now you will find in the Quran an overemphasis on the remembrance of Allah. Remember Allah day and night. وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ ذِكْرًا كَثِيرًا. Remember Allah plentifully. وَسَبِّحُوهُ بُكْرَةً وَأَصِيلًا. And do subhanallah, subhanallah, subhanallah in the mornings and at nights. Why? Because the soul comes from a place of the presence of divinity. In the bodily, it has become veiled. When you cause it to hear this name, Allah, 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 the soul will begin to remember its original position. Let's go a little bit further into it in the next few minutes that we have. Dhikr means to remind. Remind what? Remind the soul of where it was, so that the soul can awaken. What happens with the remembrance of Allah, and there's a phenomenal verse that I'm going to quote. What happens with the remembrance of Allah is that the mind, the constant bombarding thoughts within the mind, become arrested as the soul begins to find calm. The heart, with momentous emotions that are ridding it of its peace, begin to come to a state of calm. Think about it. Aren't we constantly preoccupied in the world of our heads? Aren't we constantly preoccupied? We constantly have mobile phones, don't we? We constantly need to have sensory input. It's because we are very bodily. We are very much detached from our own existences. We have become very arbitrary creatures. We are not alive. These are bodies floating through. And that's why the Prophet said, "An-nasu niyamin matu intabahu," that people are asleep. When they die, they awaken. At once, when sensuous input goes, they begin to see, oh my God, this was me. But we are constantly preoccupied. Money, business, friends, love, hate, criticism, entertainment. We have no peace. The Prophet said that the joy of solitude cannot be expressed. But solitude is the biggest calamity on our heads. Oh my God, I'm so bored. I'm so alone. What will I do? I don't have anything to do. Then we go for therapies, don't we? Okay, try and do this, try and think about this to preoccupy ourselves. It's amazing how we have become as a human community. The first Imam said, he said, if you could understand the taste of being abstemious, you will never eat again. If only you could understand the taste of removing yourself from the body, you will never have another morsel. But because we are so immersed within the body, and the body prevails, we find it difficult to understand these ideas. So, the Quran says, do dhikr excessively, excessive dhikr. Keep on chanting. Even if it has no value for you, force yourself. It's like somebody who has become a little bit unhealthy. And you tell that person, can you walk for 20 minutes? They go out walking and they get an asthma attack, they can't breathe, they say, look, this is no good for me. But the dietitian and the physician and the life coach says what? Do it. Carry on doing it. Do it for a month and then you'll see the difference. That's the way the prescription of the Quran is. And that is the way the Prophet has taught. Do dhikr, excessive dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do not abandon it just because it has no effect on you. It is because you're so wrapped up in the body and the bodily, that the most blessed name is unable to move you. But continue chanting the name of Allah. Do not stop. Don't stop. Carry on chanting it. For at some point, Allah will begin to penetrate. The first thing that will happen is that your thoughts will become arrested. The second thing that will happen is your emotions will calm down. And then when you sit inside the garden and you say, Allah, 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 Subhanallah, you will see something you have never seen. You will see what the trees are saying. When I said to somebody that the walls of the mosque spoke with me, I was obviously young at that point and naive. He said, what are you on? So, they will speak. By God, they have a speech. When you visit the mosque every day in the morning and you pray, you open up to the life of that mosque and the love of that mosque. And you know how much that mosque loves you. The Prophet said, that mountain, I'm in love with it and it loves me. The Prophet had a name for his sword and showed affection to his sword. I show affection to my car. Because it's a living being and you don't know when I'm saying something in jest and when I'm serious, do you? Salawat. It might seem strange, but when we sit with a calm state, we become pacified. When we are pacified, the nature that is in abundance around us begins to suggest itself. For the first time, we will observe the redness of a rose. And we will say, Subhanallah. For the first time, the fragrance will come to us. We will smell and we say, Subhanallah. What a beautiful fragrance this is. For the first time, we will taste food and we'll say to our spouses, thank you for making such delicious food. Even if it's not delicious, we will find it delicious. For the first time, we will begin to appreciate small things. That is when the heart begins to open. That is when we are becoming alive again. So the masters say that when you chant the name of Allah, 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 after a little while, you will hear the heart call out Allah, Allah, Allah. Now look at what the Quran says. Inna salat tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. That the salah wards you away from that which is unchaste and that which is reprehensible. We said that, didn't we? And after that it says, وَلَذِكْرُ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ. But the remembrance of Allah is greater. Imagine. Because once we remind the heart of the dhikr of Allah, that is when the heart awakens to its reality. And in the final analysis, the Quran says, أَلَا إِنَّا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنَّ الْقُلُوبِ. You pray your salah, give your zakah, perform your siyam, perform your hajj, but the heart will not find peace because the heart still feels it is the other. When it is immersed in the remembrance of God and it begins to forget itself and God emerges, that is when finally the heart finds its destiny. And as it finds its destiny, it comes to a rest. And as it comes to a rest, there is a cry from above, "O contented soul, return to your Lord." With that, we come to the end of Islamic prescriptions. We come to this fateful night. The way Hussein is remembering Allah cannot be described. It is said the reverberations of the devotions of Imam Hussein and his followers were so intense, like singing bees, that 32 people defected from the army of Yazid and joined with the army of Imam Hussein. The night is progressing. Imam Sajjad says that I was unwell. My aunt Zainab was nursing me. My father Hussein came. And as he came in, he was lost in his own thoughts. And he said, "O time, woe unto you as a friend. For how many have awoken in your lap, in your companionship, only for you to put them to rest before nightfall. Indeed, the promise shall come to pass, and the matter shall lie in the hands of the Mighty One." I understood what he was saying. He was pronouncing his own death. Tears choked me, but I did not cry. My aunt heard this. She jumped from her place. She ran towards her brother and she said, "Oh Hussein, that means I will be left without a brother." She tore her veil. If only death were to have taken me away before this day. She lamented to an extent that she lost consciousness. Hussein took her head into his lap, sprinkled water upon her face. She regained consciousness. And Imam Hussein said, "O Zainab, let shaitan not take away your perseverance." She said, "O Hussein, but who do I have? I have no grandfather, father, or brother. I only have you." The night progresses. Zainab is filled with anguish. She wishes to see her brother. As she advances towards his tent, she sees the tent of Hussein unguarded. In a rage, she says to herself, "I will surely reprimand Abbas and Habib for leaving my brother unguarded on such a sensitive night." She looks into the tent of Hussein. Hussein is in prostration praying to Allah. She turns. As she advances to the tent of Abbas, she hears sounds of voices coming out. She turns. She opens the tent slightly. She looks inside. Abbas is in the center, polishing his blade, and the Hashimis are rotating around him. He calls out, "O sons of Hashim, why have we gathered here on this night? What shall you do tomorrow when the battle breaks out?" They say, "O Abbas, O master, you are our commander. Tell us and you shall find us obedient. Tomorrow, when the battle breaks out, you will be the first ones to taste death. Before the helpers of Hussein, lest the people say that Hussein valued his family over his friends." Zainab was overcome by emotions. Her eyes began to tear. As she retreated, she heard similar noises emanating from the tent of Habib. She looked inside and she found Habib in a similar way, polishing his sword, and the Ansar rotating around him. "O Ansar, why have you left your homes? Why have you gathered here on this night? What shall you do tomorrow when the battle breaks out?" Oh Habib, you are our master. The command is yours. Order, and we shall obey. He said, tomorrow, when the battle breaks out, you will be the first ones to give your lives. Let no one say that the Ansar valued their lives beyond the lives of Hussein's family. Zainab is tearing. As she is retreating, Hussein comes in front of her. She breaks into a faint smile. Hussein says, "Oh Zainab, what brings a smile to your lips on such an ominous night?" She explains to Hussein of what she has heard. Imam says, "Oh Zainab, do you wish to see the loyalty of these people?" She says, "Indeed, oh brother." He says, "Stand behind that tree." Imam Hussein calls out, "Oh Abbas, oh sons of Hashim, hasten to me. Oh Habib, oh Ansar, come to me." They come running to Hussein. Hussein said, "Oh people, these people will not rest until they put me to death. Your living or your dying shall not save me. Take the darkness of the night as a garment and a cloak for you to leave from this place. I relieve you of the burden of allegiance." No sooner had Hussein said this, they unsheathed their swords and placed them upon their necks. They said, "Hussein, do you doubt us? Command us and we will behead ourselves." Hussein turned to his brothers and children. They say, "Oh Hussein, how can you bring such words to your lips?" He turns to the children of Muslim ibn Aqil, "Your father has given his life." They say, "You are our master. You are our leader. You are our uncle. The likes of you do not exist upon this earth. We will die for you, O uncle. We will give our children for you and our women." Muslim ibn Awsaja stands. He says, "Oh Hussein, we will fight your enemy tomorrow with our swords. When our swords break, with our spears. When they break, we will throw stones at them. If after that, O Hussein, if my hands are cut, if I'm cut into pieces and then burned, if I am restored 70 times over, 70 times I will give my life for you." Hussein smiles. He says, "By God, none before me has been given companions the likes of you." The Zakirin often narrate here. He said, "Look towards the heavens. Look what awaits you." They look, they say, "Oh Hussein, allow us to give our lives for you." Hussein said, "The time shall come." He turns to his companions. He said, "Know well that after my death, my sisters, my daughters shall be taken as captives. I ask you to take your women folk to the nearby Qabila of Bani Asad and leave them there." Ali ibn Madahir comes into his tent. His wife asks, Habib's younger brother, his wife asks, "What was Hussein saying?" He said, "He asks me to take you back to the Qabila of Bani Asad." Why? Because he says we will all be killed and his women will be taken as captive. She strikes her head against the pole of the tent. She says, "Ali, sorrow be your lot. Shall Zainab be taken as captive and your wife live as a free woman? Go and give your life for Hussein and allow me to be with Zainab." Nafi bin Hilal says, it was the depth of the night. Hussein emerges from his camp and goes towards the wilderness. I followed him, fearing an ambush and an attack upon him. Hussein heard my footprints. He turned back. He says, "Nafi, what do you want?" "I come to protect you." He says, "Come to me." "Oh Hussein, what is it that you do?" He said, "I examine the land to see where the high raised places are and where the ditches are, where the trees are, where the enemies can wait for us in ambush. He held my hand and he said to me, Nafi, don't you want to save your life and go away? I cried, I fell at his feet. I said, oh Master, who do I have in this life other than you? Allow me to have the honor of dying for you. We walked. He stood at a place. He breathed a sigh, sorrowful sigh. I said, oh Hussein, what is this? He says, Nafi, none shall remain. It is as if I see myself begging for water at this point. And arrows will be fired instead. The day of Ashura begins. The battle commences. Hussein loses his all. It is the late afternoon. No one remains with Hussein. The wounded Imam ascends his steed, looks towards the torn bodies, and cries out, Hal min nasirin yansuruna, Hal min mughithin yughithuna. Is there a helper who will come to our aid? Is there anybody who will pay heed to my cries? There was silence. Suddenly the cries of women arose. He ran to the tent. He said, has a child died through thirst? Kulthum came to him. She said, oh brother, baby Ali Asghar thirsts, and we fear he will die. Get back some water for him. What would be the sentiment of the mother of this Asghar? She would want to see her Hussein in a helpless child. Imam Hussein said, give my son to me. He places his abba upon Asghar, lest the heat of the sun kill him. He goes towards the enemies. Have you brought the Quran to intercede for you, Hussein? Hussein is silent. He removes his abba and reveals Asghar. He said, oh people, I have wronged you if that is what you feel. What has this little child done to you? Do you not see how he thirsts and how he dies out of thirst? It will not be long before the thirst kills him, O people. If you feel I will drink your water, then I will hold him, come and put a few drops of water in his mouth. The enemies look at the scene and they begin to weep and turn. Umar ibn Sa'd, seeing this state, fearing a reprisal, he turns to Hurmala, Hurmala, sever Hussein's speech. As if Hussein holds his Asghar and pleads to Allah, oh Allah, I have no more offerings other than he. I have brought my last offering to you. Hussein raises his akbar towards the sky. Hurmala, put him to death. We hear that Hurmala joins his arrow into his bow, but his hand trembles. Umar ibn Sa'd looks at him, Hurmala, why do you tremble so? Could that be the mother of the little child who emerges from the tent with such anguish? He releases the arrow. Hussein is pleading with the enemies. The arrow penetrates within the tender neck. Ali Asghar's head is cut from ear to ear. Hussein sees the scene and is in a state of shock. Asghar's blood oozes into the palms of Hussein. And as he feels the warmth of Asghar's blood, he realizes what has happened. Hussein begins to tremble uncontrollably. He looks towards the skies and looks towards the earth. He takes the blood and wipes it upon his beard. And he says, oh child, like this shall we be raised in front of your grandfather. Hussein moves forward and calls out, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, ridan biqada'ihi wa tasliman li amri. But he stops and he retreats. I ask, O Hussein, you have carried the arms of your Abbas. You have extracted the dagger from the chest of your Akbar. You have carried the torn body of your Qasim. Hussein, this is a weightless child. Why do you tremble so? O Hussein, move forward. Hussein turns to me and he says, you do not know. He has a mother waiting for him. Hussein advances towards the tent. Sakina comes running. Oh father, have you brought water for my brother? They have killed your brother, O little Sakina. The mother of Asghar comes. She looks at the state of Asghar and she says, oh child, are the likes of you slain in this way? Matam Hussein.
A sweet baby in a battlefield, not in a mother's dream. Oh my Asghar, a sweet baby in a battlefield, not in a mother's dream. Oh my Asghar. The call of Halmin was all too clear. I was terrified, you had no fear. Such a brave heart in someone so small. Where was the courage from? Oh my Asghar, a sweet baby in a battlefield, not in a mother's dream. Oh my Asghar, your father came back, his shoulders sheared, walking to and fro, blood in his beard. What did happen there? Can someone tell me? Why didn't you come back? Oh my Asghar, a sweet baby in a battlefield, not in a mother's dream. Oh my Asghar. Sham-e-Ghariba, oh so much cruelty, so many enemies, there was no safety. The tents were ransacked, then set on fire. Your cradle was burnt, oh my Asghar, a sweet baby in a battlefield, not in a mother's dream. Oh my Asghar, I was not able to feed you for many days. I had no food or water for many days, but only after Sham-e-Ghariba did I have milk, oh my asghar, a sweet baby in a battlefield, not in a mother's dream, oh my asghar. Sham-e-Ghariba, in the dead of night, we got some water to ease Ruqayyah's plight. With that water, she went wandering, looking for you, oh my asghar, a sweet baby in a battlefield, not in a mother's dream, oh my asghar. I had a dream that you would grow up to, truthful and pious, like all around you. I had pictured you next to your father, just like Akbar, oh my asghar, a sweet baby in a battlefield, not in a mother's dream, oh my asghar.
नसीब अपना तेरा सदा सकीना की आई, नसीब अपना तेरा कहाँ कहाँ मैंने असगर, कहाँ कहाँ मैंने असगर ना ढूंढा है पानी, ये किसने बाप के हाथों पे मांगा है पानी, ये किसने बाप के हाथों पे मांगा है पानी, ये किसने बाप के हाथों पे मांगा है पानी। अभी निदान आतश का सफर अधूरा था, अभी निदान आतश का सफर अधूरा था, लबे सगीर से हुरमल, लबे सगीर से हुरमल न छीना है पानी, ये किसने बाप के हाथों पे मांगा है पानी, ये किसने बाप के हाथों पे मांगा है पानी। नसीब तेरे को असग़र बयान कैसे करे, नसीब तेरे को असग़र बयान कैसे करे, गले का खून भी देकर, गले का खून भी देकर असगर ना पाया है पानी, ये किसने बाप के हाथों पे मांगा है पानी, ये किसने बाप के हाथों पे मांगा है पानी, ये किसने बाप के हाथों पे मांगा है पानी। सदा सकीना की आई नसीब अपना तेरा, सदा सकीना की आई नसीब अपना तेरा। कहाँ कहाँ मैंने असगर, कहाँ कहाँ मैंने असगर ना ढूंढा है पानी, ये किसने बाप के हाथों पे मांगा है पानी, ये किसने बाप के हाथों पे मांगा है पानी, ये किसने बाप के हाथों पे मांगा है पानी। नसीब तेरे को असगर बयान कैसे करे, नसीब तेरे को असगर बयान कैसे करे। गले का खून भी देकर, गले का खून भी देकर ना पाया है पानी, ये किसने बाप के हाथों पे मांगा है पानी, ये किसने बाप के हाथों पे मांगा है पानी।